If you've ever wondered why mortgage rates don't seem to listen to the Federal Reserve, you're not alone. In fact, most Americans misunderstand how mortgage rates actually work. And if you're waiting for the Fed to cut rates before buying a home, you may be watching the wrong thing entirely. Today, we're breaking down the biggest mortgage myth in America, what actually drives mortgage rates, and why it matters whether you're buying, selling, investing, or simply trying to understand where the housing market is headed. I'm Kyle Grimshaw, and this is the Texas Market Brief. Let's start with the myth. Most people believe the Federal Reserve sets mortgage rates. It's understandable. The news talks about rate cuts, the news talks about rate hikes, and naturally, people assume, well, if the Fed cuts rates, my mortgage rate should go down. But that's not exactly how it works. The Federal Reserve does not directly set mortgage rates. The Federal Reserve controls what's called the federal funds rate. That's the rate banks charge each other for overnight lending. That rate affects many parts of the economy. It influences borrowing conditions, it influences expectations, it influences financial markets, but it is not influencing your mortgage rate directly. Understanding that difference can save you from making expensive assumptions. So, what actually drives the mortgage rates? The short answer is the long-term bond market, more specifically, the 10-year Treasury yield. If there's one thing you remember from today's video, remember this. Mortgage rates tend to follow the 10-year Treasury much more closely than they follow the federal funds rate. But even that is only a part of the story. Mortgage rates are typically not just a 10-year Treasury note. They're more like the 10-year Treasury plus a spread. Why? Because mortgage lenders package loans into mortgage-backed securities. Investors then compare those investments against Treasury bonds, and that spread can change based on inflation expectations. Investor demand for mortgage-backed security, payment risk and prepayment risk, and lender pricing. So, when Treasury yields rise, mortgage rates often rise with them. When Treasury yields fall, mortgage rates often fall as well. But not always by the same amount, and not always immediately. That's why you'll sometimes see mortgage rates moving when the Federal Reserve hasn't done anything at all. And it's also why here in Texas, where affordability is already such a major issue, this distinction matters a lot more than people realize. Now let's make this practical. If you're buying a home and financing around $400,000, you hear on the news the Fed is expected to cut rates later this year, so you decide to wait. But then inflation comes in higher than expected. Treasury yields increase, the spread stays wide, and mortgage rates stay elevated. Now, the payment on that same house hasn't improved much at all. In fact, 1% difference in your mortgage rate on a loan around that size can mean roughly a few $100s per month in principal and interest alone. That's real money. That's a monthly budget money. That's quality of life money. And this is exactly why trying to perfectly time the market can be dangerous. Nobody consistently predicts rates correctly. Nobody. Not economists, not realtors, not lenders, and definitely not politicians. As a realtor here in Texas, I hear this all the time. People tell me, Kyle, we're waiting until rates come down. And I completely understand that mindset. I really do. Here's the challenge. Sometimes rates fall and prices rise. Sometimes rates stay high and sellers become more negotiable. Sometimes builders start offering incentives. Sometimes buyers gain negotiating power. And sometimes the monthly payment improves because of price or concessions, not because the interest rate moved very much at all. The market is constantly changing. That's why I encourage people to focus on the overall opportunity rather than a single interest rate number. Now, let's lasso this up and bring it home. Texas continues to attract businesses, jobs, and new resources, but affordability remains one of the biggest issues facing the state. Whether you're in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, you name it, or even a smaller community anywhere else in Texas. Mortgage rates play a major role in affordability, and so do home prices, and taxes, insurance, incentives, and negotiating leverage. That's why buyers in Texas can't afford to look at this as a one variable decision. A 1% difference in your rate can mean hundreds of dollars every month and thousands of dollars every year. That's real money. But so can overpaying for a home. So can missing a builder incentive. So can waiting while prices move against you. That's why the smartest buyers don't just ask, "Where are rates going?" They ask, "What is my total opportunity in this market right now?" Now, here's my opinion. There's much more to this, but I have to admit that right now I'm more worried about other things impacting the market, like the war in Iran. I think many Americans are expecting mortgage rates to fall dramatically the moment the Fed Reserve starts cutting rates. I don't think it's that simple. If inflation remains elevated, then Treasury yields may remain elevated as well. If the mortgage spread remains wide, mortgage rates may stay higher than many people expect. And even if rates do improve, they may not improve as quickly as buyers are hoping. That's why I believe buyers should focus less on predictable rates and more on finding the right property at the right price with terms for a situation that makes sense for them. Because in real estate, the best decision is usually not the perfect market timing decision. It's the decision that makes sense for your life, your budget, and your long-term plan. This week, I'm watching 3 things. Number 1, inflation data. Number 2, the 10-year Treasury yield. And number 3, mortgage spreads and labor market reports. Because all of those can have a significant impact on where mortgage rates go next. If you found today's episode helpful, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments. Are you waiting for rates to fall before buying? Or do you think affordability will improve another way? I'm Kyle Grimshaw with the Grimshaw Home Group. Thank you for joining me on episode 2 of the Texas Market Brief. I'll see you Friday.